How can you make sure that you're not starting to cry when you're singing full of emotion? That's the topic that we're going to be covering in today's episode. Let's dive into it. Hi, and welcome to this new episode in which we're going to have a conversation regarding emotions when singing. And this is a topic that, what inspired, let's put it this way. What inspired this episode was actually a question that was asked in our Singing Insiders community. So the Singing Insiders, for those who don't know, is our membership for singers that want to grow, that want to improve their singing skills, where you have feedback and support from coaches. Anyway, it's the place to be if you do want to develop yourself as a singer. And within that membership, we have a community. And in this community, you can ask questions and ask for feedback and so on and so forth. And one question that came up was, how can I make sure that I'm not starting to cry when I am singing? And especially when I'm focused on the storytelling aspect of singing in a song. So I thought that was such an interesting conversation because many singers, they believe that you're not allowed to really show 100% of your emotions when singing. So for example, if you are very sad, then many singers believe that you're not allowed to start crying on stage, for example. And I get where that's coming from because showing your emotions can be something that is very vulnerable, right? And maybe some of us in our upbringing have also received these messages of, be strong or just stop crying. I know that I've heard those things as a child. You were crying or I was crying, and then one of my parents would say, please stop crying. Or it's time to stop crying, be strong, make sure you're showing that you're strong, right? Those are all messages that we received when we were kids, or that some of us might have received when we were kids. So it's normal that we associate the idea of showing our vulnerability and showing our 100% true self and emotions as something that is not okay, or something that is not acceptable on stage. And the question that I'm asking here is it actually true? Is it true that you need to be strong when singing on stage? Is it true that you're not allowed to fully express yourself and your emotions when you're singing in front of someone else? And the truth is that oftentimes those moments of pure vulnerability is exactly what you need to create that connection with your listener. If you think about it, let me give you an example. Imagine that you're going to a concert and there are two singers that are singing that day. Singer A sings everything beautifully, vocal technique wise, it's perfect, and you're really impressed by her vocal skills. Singer B, on the other hand, is someone who touches your soul, someone who makes you think of a particular memory, someone who maybe even makes you feel something. Maybe they let you feel happiness, or maybe they let you feel nostalgia, or you're like any intense feeling. That's what singer B does to you. When you're going home that night and a friend asks you, how was the concert? Which singer do you think you're gonna be talking most of? Singer A, that was vocal technique wise super perfect, or singer B, which really touched you, or who really touched you and who really made you feel something and made you experience something? Many singers would answer when I'm asking that question. Most of the singers that I work with, they tend to say, I would talk mostly about singer B, because that's the one that most of us tend to remember afterwards. we tend to remember how someone makes us feel as a listener, right? So then why are we not allowed to show up and be vulnerable when we are on stage ourselves, when we're the ones performing? So I'm actually advocating that showing your emotions is 100% valuable for your listener. It makes that connection even stronger. Now, this is my personal opinion. I'm not saying that that's a fact or that's scientifically proven. My invitation to you would actually be to test it out. Like, test it out. How is it for you when you're only focused on vocal technique? And how is it for you when you're actually opening up and being honest in what you're feeling, in what you're experiencing towards your listener? And there are many examples of famous singers that have already cried on stage. And this goes for any emotion, by the way. Not only sadness, we can laugh. I mean, maybe you're breaking out and you're laughing and you just can't stop. Or maybe it's anger, could be too. Like, whatever the emotion is, sadness is one of them, and it manifests obviously in tears. There's many examples of famous singers that have been crying on stage. So I would highly recommend you checking those out. You can find them on YouTube if you just type in, for example, Miley Cyrus singing on stage, or Celine Dion singing on stage, and so on and so forth. And I think it's interesting because when you're watching what they're doing in those moments, if you're listening to their sound, you could argue that their singing might not be the best singing that they've done so far. It's true that they might not be fully on pitch or their voice is a little bit shaky, but how you see the listener react to their emotion is so beautiful. Like, I get goosebumps every time I'm watching those kinds of videos because the audience is so supportive. The audience is living along, is super empathic towards the person sharing their emotions and being vulnerable. Another example is if you look at friendships. I don't know what your experience is with friendships, but I tend to notice that with new friendships, at first, when you're meeting someone new and you're becoming friends, the relationship is pretty surface level. So then you're asking, how was your day? Oh, yeah, it was good. Oh, great. Yeah. What are you doing this weekend, right? So it's pretty surface level. And then there comes a point in time where someone shares something vulnerable. And maybe you share something that you're struggling with. Maybe you do cry in front of that person. Maybe you share a personal story, whatever it might be. By opening up and by allowing yourself to be vulnerable, that's where the surface level friendship transitions to something that is a more deeper level. And oftentimes that's where the core friendships are at. So when I look at my friendships in my life, the most beautiful friendships that I have are there because we've opened up to each other. And that's exactly what you can do in singing as well, and through your song, by showing up, being vulnerable. Because if you don't do that, if you don't open yourself up, if you're not being vulnerable in your singing, then you keep on hiding behind something. And maybe that's kind of a wall, right? You're hiding behind a wall. And that makes it harder to create that connection with your listener. It makes it harder for them to experience something when they're listening to you sing. And it might cause you to create that impersonal relationship when we're singing. We don't want to have that, right? So how can you actually handle this? Like, how can you do this? How can you have a little bit of control, right? So how I see it, you got two options. Option number one is what we just talked about. And that's just allowing the emotion to rise, accept that it's okay to express that emotion, whether that's crying, whether that's being angry, whether that's being hangry, maybe you're hungry and angry at the same time, whatever that emotion might be, accept that it's there and allow it to come through in your singing. That's number one. Not everyone is a fan of that, and I understand that. So that's why we have a second option. And that's something that I've been working with one of the singers in the Singing Insiders as well. And that's this idea of having some kind of levels in how much of the emotion that you're sharing. So if we're looking at option number one and we accept and we allow the emotion to be there, we might say that that's 100% the emotion that I'm feeling. In option two, you could say, well, what if I can play with some levels? How would it look like, or how would it sound like if I allow 80% of emotions in my storytelling and I keep 20% of control? What would that look like? Or maybe you can say, well, what if I do 50-50? How does my song sound like then? Or what if you do 20% of emotion and 80% of control? Or 95% of emotion and 5% of control? So do you see where I'm getting at? You can play with those things. And that is an excellent practice to go through. Because obviously when you're on stage, you're going to feel all kinds of things. Maybe a little bit of nerves or performance anxiety. That's totally normal. And then when you have those emotions coming at you as well, it might get a little bit overwhelming. So that's when the practice that you have done beforehand comes in handy. Because if you can switch in levels and say, okay, now I'm gonna just allow 80% of the emotions, that might make the whole difference for you. Now, in order to do that, obviously we need to be able to train our voices in the right way and be able to master and control our voices. And that starts with vocal technique. So here's my invitation to you. First of all, let me know how this message resonates with you, because I know it's a little bit different than the other episodes we had so far, but I thought it was such an important subject to share with you. So let me know how that resonates with you. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject as well. My invitation to you would be to also work on your vocal technique so that you have more power into controlling the sound of your voice. I got a free training coming up all around singing high notes easily and expanding your range, so the low notes will be there too. And my invitation to you is to actually go through that training. It's completely free. You can register using the link down below. I'll put it into the description, because that will give you the tools that you can then use in order to go into that control phase of things. So if you have 80% emotion, 20% of control, how do you actually control it? And that's where the training that I'm referring to will help you. So get registered, use the link in the description here down below. Let me know your thoughts. And thank you so much for having been here. This has been a great episode. Thank you for spending the time together. And I'm looking forward to see you here again next week. Talk soon. Bye.